A government report released this week warns of an alarming rise in sea levels in the years to come. Here's one statistic. Over the past 100 years, the sea level rose by about a foot. But now new estimates say that same increase is likely to happen in just the next 3 decades. This shift is projected to bring about more flooding and financial hardship across the country, and the effects could spill well beyond coastal communities. NOAA Administrator Rick Spinrad joins me now for more. He is also the Undersecretary of Commerce for Oceans and Atmosphere. Rick, welcome. It's so great to have you with us. Break down this report your agency helped put together, if you will. What are the key takeaways, and what exactly is leading to these rising sea levels? Is it all attributable to global warming and carbon emissions?
So thank you, Tanya. And yeah, this report is particularly significant, largely because of the accuracy of the information contained therein and the relevance to public safety and the economy. So the rise in sea level is basically attributable to melting ice in places like Greenland and Antarctica, coupled with just the expansion of water when it gets warmer. And the third factor, and the reason why it's slightly different in the Gulf than it might be on the East Coast or West Coast, is because the land movement changes as well. So in the Gulf, where we've got subsidence, you see a little bit higher sea level rise compared to places like the West Coast. And the main value, if you will, of this particular report is you can take it to the bank. This sea level rise is going to affect everything from infrastructure to property costs and property values. And so consequently, the accuracy of the forecast information here can be used by local communities to rebuild infrastructure, can be used by insurance companies. It's basically a way for us to become much more resilient and in our adaptation to climate change.
So you're saying we know over the next 30 years that the sea levels will rise about a foot, right? That's knowledge that we can take to the bank, as you said. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That's the real main takeaway from this particular report, that in the past we've had a broader range of predictions, but now the science is so good and the predictions are so skillful that we can comfortably and accurately say 10 to 12 inches of sea level rise will be seen by 2050.
So, Rick, talk to us a little bit about the pace we're seeing here, because this represents a significant increase to what we've seen over the past 100 years, doesn't it?
Yeah, in fact, the changes that we'll see in the next 30 years are equivalent to what we've seen in the last 100 years. This 10 to 12 inch rise in sea level is what we saw over the last century. And what it means is that we've got to start planning now. We've got to take this information, use it to help guide decisions. You know, the Biden administration is leaning forward aggressively on making sure we reduce emissions, we start making better use of renewable energy, and that all has to happen. At the same time, we've got to be adapting and becoming resilient to the changes we know will be coming in the next couple of decades. So this increase in sea level, the rise of 10 to 12 inches, will actually result in the flooding of about 2,700 square miles of our coastlines right now. And so starting now, building out now, planning now is what this clarion call of sea level rise means to us as a society.
And to your point that we have to start preparing for what we know is going to happen, let's talk a little bit about the impact on coastal communities and beyond. How will this change their everyday lives economically and otherwise? And what could the domino effect be on the rest of the country?
Yeah, think about what coastal communities are facing right now with respect to rebuilding or changing their infrastructure, everything from roads to water treatment plants to the electrical grid, not to mention at the individual level, the costs of property and houses and the threats to the safety of the individuals. And so all of these factors of our lives are going to be affected. And by taking advantage of this information now, we can ensure that we're saving and we're protecting lives and protecting property. As for the rest of the country, if you will, it's important to recognize that 95% of our imported goods in this country come through the ports along our coasts. And so if we're not starting to address the infrastructure needs in the ports right now, because of sea level rise, we will be challenging our ability to make sure those imports can get through to the consumers and users swiftly and effectively. At NOAA, we're trying to do this across the board for any number of impacts from climate change through something we're calling the Climate Ready Nation. And the sea level rise report is part of our effort to help ensure a climate-ready nation.
And Rick, of course, we know what's going to happen over the next 3 decades, but we need to look forward, as you said, because we obviously don't want to see this continue at this pace. So what realistically needs to be done to change course? You mentioned some of the the Biden administration's initiatives, but is it not too late for meaningful action?
We can take a lot of action right now, and that's why we're excited about how the bipartisan infrastructure law that was just signed by the president a little while back can be used immediately to start addressing things like hardening port infrastructure, rethinking how we're building out our roads and our electrical infrastructure. That's what we can start doing right now. Meantime, in the longer term, looking at reductions of carbon emissions is a way to ensure that we don't face the worst case scenario by the end of this century, for example.
Rick Spinrad, NOAA Administrator, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.